about 60 years or so. So no, in 2036 we are unable to travel back 1,000 years due to the error rate in the system. The divergence between the world line of origin and the target world line would be too great. If one were to try and travel back that far, history would look nothing like what you would expect. In other words, if I wanted to go back 2,000 years and meet Christ, there is a better than average chance I would end up on the world line where he was never born.
Hold on. What are those pictures? It looked like a bucket seat with a seatbelt.
Yep, that's because on John Teeter's first trip, the time machine was mounted inside a 67 Chevy.
No, I guess the DeLorean is too on the nose.
Well, the reason for the Chevy and why John later moved the machine to a truck is because the C-204 is heavy. It needs a vehicle with a suspension that can handle the weight. Plus, the time machine has to be mobile. Since it only travels through time and not space, you have to drive to your physical destination first and then move through time. He chose those vehicles because they blend into the times he was traveling to.
Oh, did he say what it feels like to time travel? Like, does it hurt? Does your face get all stretchy?
John Teeter does talk about this.
The gravity field generated by the unit overtakes you very quickly. You feel a tug toward the unit similar to rising quickly in an elevator, and it continues to rise based on the power setting the unit is working under. At 100% power, the constant pull of gravity can be as high as 2 Gs or more, depending on how close you are to the unit. There are no serious side effects, but I try to avoid eating before a flight. No bright flash of light is seen. Outside, the vehicle appears to accelerate as the light is bent around it. We have to wear sunglasses or close our eyes, as this happens due to a short burst of ultraviolet radiation. Personally, I think it looks like you're driving under a rainbow. After that, it appears to fade to black and remains totally black until the unit is turned off. We're advised to keep the windows closed as a great deal of heat builds up outside the car. The gravity field also traps a small air pocket around the car that acts if you're only O2 supply, unless you bring compressed air with you.
2 Gs, ugh. I can never time travel because of my IBS.
That's TMI.
No, it's IBS.
Never mind. Naturally, people were skeptical of all this technology, but John Teeter didn't really care.
My goal is not to be believed. Most people do not take news of the war very well, but I find that everyone believes it's inevitable. I watch every day what you are doing as a society. While you sit by and watch your constitution being torn away from you, you willfully eat poisoned food, buy manufactured products no one needs, and turn an uncaring eye away from millions of people suffering and dying all around you. Perhaps I should let you all in on a little secret. No one likes you in the future. This time period is looked at as being full of lazy, self-centered, civically ignorant sheep. Perhaps you should be less concerned about me and more concerned about that.
You know, he makes a lot of good points, but there's no reason to be a dick about it.
John Teeter's face was never seen, his voice was never heard, and John Teeter is not his real name, so there's not much we know about him. But one person did have a close relationship with John, or at least claimed to, Pamela Moore. Pamela was very active on the message boards and spent a lot of time chatting with John over IM. Before John Teeter left, he said he would make a departure video and send it to Pamela.
How's she supposed to know the video's legit?
Well, because John provided Pamela with a secret song to act as a password. This is something only the two of them know, so she can identify imposters. And to this day, the departure video has not arrived, and Pamela has never revealed the secret song. On March 24th, 2001, John Teeter would leave his final message and some words of wisdom.
I will be leaving this world line shortly, and this will be my final post. There are only a handful of people who will know exactly when I will be leaving, and I'm sure they will let you know when I'm gone. In the last few days, I have found your choice of topics quite interesting. And from an objective viewpoint, I think it collectively answers one of your own questions. If time travel is real, where are all the time travelers? In the past, I've stated that, quite frankly, you all scare the hell out of me. And I'm sure other temporal drivers would feel the same. But now I have an expanded explanation. A while ago, I related an experience I had with my parents while we were driving down the highway. Every now and then, we would pass someone who was in obvious distress with their vehicle. I was amazed that so many people could pass the mud without stopping to help. Their explanation was fear. The risk of helping someone was too great, and with today's technology, they probably had a cell phone anyway. If they didn't, the walk to a gas station would be good for them and teach them a lesson for running out of gas. This is why time travelers do not show themselves. In trying to help you, we put ourselves at great risk, and there's really no point to it. I already know you won't pay attention or believe me because we've already been through it on this world line. Besides, I think the walk to the gas station will do you some good. I also want to thank Pamela for helping me with the email and everyone else who asked intelligent and insightful questions. I've learned a great deal. My parting thought revolves around something JC has been harping on since day one. No, I do not have a secret agenda, but I've been paying a great deal of attention to your world line. My interaction with you was not a direct mission parameter, but it was a secondary mission protocol based on standing orders given to all temporal drivers. That secondary objective is basically to gather as much information about a world line based on a set of observable variables when we first arrive. Your world line met those conditions. What amazes me is why no one here wonders why Y2K didn't hit them at all. Bring a gas can with you when the car dies on the side of the road. Farewell, John.
And John Titor was gone and hasn't been heard from since. But that was really just the beginning of it. When the John Titor story first landed in 2001, it was a sensation. But as the years went on, we've been able to see the accuracy of John's predictions. John predicted a civil war in the United States that would begin in 2005. Obviously, that didn't happen. But you can make the case that America has never been more divided than it is today.
Thanks, Twitter.
20% of adults in a recent survey said they believe a civil war is likely within the next 10 years. That's a high percentage. And John Titor predicted a nuclear war in 2015, and that too didn't happen. But considering current world events, the last time we were this close to nuclear war was the Cuban Missile Crisis. I actually think we're in more danger now. He predicted there would be no Olympic Games after 2004. Now, he was wrong about that, but there were no 2020 Olympics. John Titor did get a few things right. There was a mad cow disease outbreak in the early 2000s.
It's America's first confirmed case of bovine spongiform encephalitis in 6 years. BSE is mad cow disease, a potentially deadly brain-wasting infection that can be transferred to humans.
When John Titor was posting in early 2001, most people were still accessing the internet with a dial-up modem. John said in the future, the internet would look more like the current cell phone system. That's exactly right. He said that in the future, the entertainment industry would be decentralized, and anyone would be able to create video which could be watched by many people. More people watch YouTube than watch the networks or even go to the movies. John Titor was right again. He predicted breakthroughs in high-energy physics at CERN. In 2013, the Higgs boson was confirmed. Stephen Hawking originally thought that everything that enters a black hole disappears forever. Titor said that Stephen Hawking made a mistake about this. Stephen Hawking did later change his mind. Now, many of these predictions could be dismissed as educated guesses by someone who was intelligent and knew a lot about science and technology. But there's no denying that John Titor was right. As for the predictions John Titor got wrong, true believers, and there are still a lot of those, always fall back on the many worlds theory. Sure, many of John Titor's predictions were wrong in our timeline, but they came true in other timelines, and there's no way to prove this wrong. But if you look closely at the John Titor story, you do find inconsistencies. You also find convenient coincidences. Because of these problems with the story, many believe that John Titor was a hoax. And if that's true, then who was the real John Titor? Well, there are a few suspects. Whenever anyone does a story about John Titor and who he actually may be, there are a few names that always pop up. The first is Joseph Matheny. He's described as a writer and transmedia artist, and he's mostly known for Ong's Hat, which was one of the first alternate reality or real-time interactive games. And Matheny makes a good case. He said that he, along with 3 other people, developed the John Titor story as a fun experiment to see if they could develop an internet myth.
Mission accomplished.
Matheny won't divulge who the other 3 people are because they're pretty high up in the entertainment industry and have reputations to protect. But but a lot of the story tracks. Matheny says the time machine we see in the fuzzy photos was created by a prop designer who's worked on major movies. And John Titor fans have been able to identify pieces of the time machine that are actually real things. Matheny says the reason the messages often have different tones is because they were written by different people on the team. Matheny was responsible for character development. And the reason that John Titor's story is so similar to John Connor's is because it was intentional. I've heard and read some interviews with Matheny, and at first I was skeptical. Initially, I didn't think he had the tech or science background to flesh out the details in the John Titor story. I was very wrong. Matheny was involved in tech since the 80s. He worked with Adobe and Netscape in the early days and holds a few patents. Also, his game Ong's Hat had references to theoretical physics. He had the tech chops and a track record in creating online myths. He could have definitely pulled this off. Still, I'd love to see hard evidence. Matheny won't provide any. And when asked, he gets pretty annoyed. He says believe him or don't, he doesn't care. I think that after 20 years, he's sick of people asking him about John Titor. But there are more people to look at. The other name that comes up in the John Titor story is Larry Haber and the Haber brothers. Larry Haber is a Florida-based entertainment attorney. He claims to represent John Titor's mom, Kay, and the Titor family.
Hey, how does a lawyer sleep?
I don't know how.
Oh, first he lies on one side, and then he lies on the other.
Good one. Now, I've seen and read a number of interviews with Larry Haber. He definitely does not have the technology or science background to create John Titor. But his brothers do. Richard Haber is an IT administrator, and Maury Haber is a very senior cybersecurity professional. Maury also has a lot of experience writing about technology. And if you go down the John Titor rabbit hole on YouTube, you'll eventually run into a channel called Hoax Hunter, run by John Rasmus Houston, and I'll link to his channel below. Now, John has done a ton of research on the subject. He's tracked P.O. boxes, he's done text comparisons of Maury Haber's writing to John Titor's posts, he's tracked all the usernames from John Titor's message board. I mean, this is exhaustive research. He's convinced that John Titor is actually Maury Haber, who eventually enlisted his lawyer brother to represent the story.
What does a lawyer get when you
Why
give
is
a
this
Viagra?
spray?
What?
Tola!
Oh.
Have a problem with lawyers, do you?
I've been divorced 3 times. What do you think?
Larry Haber has been attached to John Titor for years. Not only does he claim to represent the Titor family, in 2003 he registered the John Titor Foundation LLC, a for-profit business, and this LLC published John Titor's posts as a book called A Time Traveler's Tale. Larry Haber also registered John Titor as a trademark in 2007.
So this lawyer claims to represent the Titor family, right?
Yeah,
And at the same time, he's got businesses and books that is making money from this thing?
that's right.
Isn't that a conflict of interest?
I think it is, but I guess Larry Haber and the Titor family are okay with it. He won't say.
Hey, how do you get a lawyer out of a tree?
How?
Cut the rope.
Joseph Matheny said he had someone reach out to the publisher of Larry Haber's book and get it pulled. Larry Haber can't confirm that Matheny did this, but he did confirm that the book is out of print and doesn't know why.
So this Matheny guy torpedoed the lawyer?
That's what it looks like.
He's okay in my book. Hey, what do you have when a lawyer is buried up to his neck in sand?
What do you have?
Not enough sand. I got a million of them. Oh, baby.
In Larry Haber's defense, even though he represents the Titor
100
family, he
credits.
doesn't claim to believe the story. He says he doesn't know one way or the other and doesn't care. He's just working for his client.
And making money from his client.
Yeah, and that. Pamela Moore said she was sent a copy of Larry Haber's book, signed by John with a song quoted at the end.
Was it the secret song?
Nope.
How do you know if a lawyer is lying? His lips are moving.
Over 20 years later, and the John Titor story still fascinates people. Honestly, I had never considered doing this story because it's been done so many times, but it's one of the most requested topics on the channel. I think the reason we love time travel stories is because it all comes down to possibilities and opportunities. A story about a possible future, especially such a frightening one, gives us an opportunity to reflect on our present and choose a path to avoid that dark future, or it gives us a chance to prepare for it. Think of how useful it would be if someone came back from that future to warn us, to give us the exact steps to follow to ensure our survival. Well, before John Teeter disappeared, he did just that.
Do not eat or use products from any animal that is fed and eats parts of its own dead. Do not kiss or have intimate relations with anyone you do not know. Learn basic sanitation and water purification. Be comfortable around firearms. Learn to shoot and clean a gun. Get a good first aid kit and learn to use it. Find 5 people within 100 miles that you trust with your life and stay in contact with them. Get a copy of the U.S. Constitution and read it. Eat less. Get a bicycle and 2 sets of spare tires. Ride it 10 miles a week. Consider what you would bring with you if you had to leave your home in 10 minutes and never return.
Now, I don't know if the story of John Teeter is real. I don't think we'll ever know. But still, my family is taking his advice. We've got the first aid kit, the bicycle, and lots of ammo. We're prepared for the future that John described. At least, as best as we can be. And it's okay if you don't believe that John Teeter is from the future. It's a story that anyone would be skeptical of. But be skeptical of John Teeter at your own risk. Me? I'm not willing to take the chance. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. My name is AJ, that's Hecklefish. This has been the Y-Files. If you had fun or learned anything, do me a favor and like, subscribe, comment, share. That stuff really helps the channel. Unlike most topics we cover on the channel, today's topic was recommended by you. If there's a story you'd like to see or learn more about, go to theyfiles.com/tips. And special thanks to our patrons who make this channel possible. I'm amazed by your generosity. And if you'd like to support the channel, consider becoming a member on Patreon or grabbing something from the Y-File store.
Or make your friends jealous with a Hecklefish t-shirt.
I don't know if your friends will be jealous, but they will have questions. That's gonna do it. Until next time, be safe, be kind, and know that you are appreciated.
Hello, Bob. How are you today?
Doing good, how are you?
Good. My name is Chami. He's my husband D, and we are in charge of doing this last interview for you to get your check.
Bob, what's up? How you doing?
Doing good.
See, you got that Texas flag on that hat. Proud to be a Texan.
Oh, that's
Because
awesome.
we're from California, but when you meet people that are born and raised in Texas,
Well, I'm gonna leave.
Oh, you're leaving? You're not even gonna eat?
I'm not even gonna eat.
What?
I know, it's just so weird.
Okay.
No, I think you're a really nice, great person. I just feel like we're not a love match.
Right. No. I totally feel you, but like, I do think it's kind of weird that you can't even like enjoy a nice meal.
Next up is Omid, a
That's
big-time
crazy.
finance guy who's never been able to close the deal on marriage.
You know, divesting a company that's probably worth
What
$1 billion,
the
but we
fuck?
sold it
So
for,
good.
1.2. So stuff like that, it gets me excited. Howdy.
Welcome.
Hey,
How are you?
Good.
I love your suit.
Thank you.
It's Italian.
Of course. I think historically I've been single because the last 14 years I've been focused on my career. Dating is tough, especially meeting people, and I travel a lot. How's your day going?
It is going very good. How about yourself?
Really good. I think my worst first date was
November 30th, 1989, just after 3 a.m. New York City. Janet Kimball was driving over the Brooklyn Bridge when her car stalled and slowly rolled to a stop. After a couple of failed attempts to get the car started, Janet was hit by a bright light, bright enough that she had to shield her eyes. The light was coming from an apartment building. Janet thought maybe someone was shooting a movie, not unusual in New York City. Then she saw that the light was coming from a saucer-shaped craft hovering above the building. Okay, it's a science fiction movie, Janet thought. But it wasn't a movie. This was happening for real. As Janet's eyes adjusted to the brightness, she saw something levitating in the light, objects floating up to the saucer. When she focused, she realized they weren't objects, they were people. Well, one of them was. In an instant, the light went out and the saucer plunged into the East River. There were 23 eyewitnesses to this event, including one of the highest-ranking politicians in the world. And people being transported to a UFO by a beam of light in the middle of New York City? That's not the weirdest part of the story. November 30th, 1989, just after 3 a.m., New York City. As Linda Napolitano was falling asleep, she felt a strange numbness in her feet that started to creep up her legs. She opened her eyes, and standing at the foot of her bed was a small, pale, humanoid creature with a large round head and big black eyes. From behind the curtains, another creature emerged, and then another. 4 or 5 of these beings slowly and silently walked toward her bed. Linda screamed for her husband lying right next to her, but he didn't wake up. The numbness reached her neck, and she couldn't move. She made another attempt to scream, but then she heard a voice in her mind say, "Be quiet." Then Linda felt herself levitating above the bed. She slowly floated from the bedroom to the living room, the creatures silently walking beside her. Then she floated through a window and through the safety bars on the outside of the window. She was then hovering outside her apartment 12 stories up. She remembers thinking, "Oh my God, I hope I don't fall." She was surrounded by a bright blue light. The other creatures were also floating in the light. Slowly, they all ascended into the saucer-shaped craft. Once inside the ship, the humanoid creatures escorted Linda down a hallway that was lined with benches. As they passed various rooms, she heard the hiss of doors sliding open and closing again. The creatures were quietly talking to each other, but they were speaking a language Linda didn't understand. Finally, they bring Linda to a bright room, and in the center of the room is a long table.
Oh no, the dreaded long table.
This sent Linda into a panic, and she started screaming. In her mind, she was screaming, "What do you want from me?" But the words that came out of her mouth were in an alien language. One of the beings put a hand over Linda's mouth. Then she felt something in her nose. A long medical instrument was forced into her right nostril.
You know, as far as alien probes go, a nostril isn't the worst option.
That's a good point. One of the creatures then moved very close to Linda and gently ran its hand through her hair and placed a warm hand on her cheek. She asked him, "Why am I here?" He said, "Just for a visit." Instantly, Linda was able to move. She sat up on the table, heard a loud roar, and then she was sitting up in her bed. She tried to wake her husband, Steve, but he wasn't moving. Then a wave of panic washed over her, her children. She bolted down the hall and into the bedroom shared by her 2 young sons. She called them, but they didn't respond. She grabbed Johnny, her youngest. She was sobbing as she shook him. He didn't wake up. In the art world, Bud Hopkins was a big deal. His art is part of the permanent collections of the Guggenheim, the Whitney, the Met, the Museum of Modern Art, and the British Museum, and a few others.
Yeah, this is his art?
Yep.
Are you sure these weren't made by some kid in 3rd grade?
Yeah, I'm sure he's a world-famous artist.
Yeah, I don't get it. Anybody could do this.
What do you know about art?
You know, I happen to be the proud owner of Fish Playing Poker.
Don't you mean dogs playing poker?
What the hell are you talking about?
Forget it. Bud Hopkins was not just a well-known artist, he also made a name for himself as a UFO investigator. He was one of the leading experts on alien abduction experiences. He investigated hundreds of cases. He wrote several books, including the bestseller Intruders and Missing Time. He even hosted support groups in his home for witnesses and survivors.
Yeah, okay, you won me over. This guy sounds alright.
He was a good guy. He was well respected and well liked, and everyone who knew him said he was kind, compassionate, and intelligent. Because of his reputation and open door policy, he got a lot of mail. But a letter he received in February 1991 stood out from the others.
Dear Mr. Hopkins, my partner and I are police officers. We've been in a serious dilemma because of our strict profession and our lack of knowledge on this subject. About 3:30 a.m. in late November 1989, we sat in our patrol car underneath the elevated FDR Drive. There it was, a strange oval hovering over the top of an apartment building 2 or 3 blocks from where we were sitting. A very bright blue light coming from the bottom of it. I yelled for my partner, who was just as excited as I was. We were going to get out of the car, but what can we do for that poor little girl or woman wearing the full white nightgown? She was floating in midair in a bright beam of whitish blue light, looking like an angel. She was then brought up into the bottom of that very large oval, about 3/4 the size of the building across. This poor person was escorted out of a window by 3 ugly but smaller human-like creatures. After she was up and in, the oval plunged into the river, not far from the Brooklyn Bridge. Mr. Hopkins, the oval never came up from under the river. The guilt has lingered, and we find it difficult living with ourselves. My partner and I have been debating if we should seek her out. We know the building and we know the window. Perhaps she was just a figment of our imagination. If she isn't, is she alive and well? We have to know. If we should decide to seek this person out, we'll contact you again with further information if we do find her. And I hope we do. Many thanks. Police officers Dan and Richard.
Bud Hopkins was amazed. He knew the woman referenced in the letter. She'd been coming to his support groups. It was Linda Napolitano. This was the first time Bud Hopkins had accounts of the same event from different people. About 2 weeks later, Linda called. She was agitated. She had just had a visit from 2 police detectives named Richard and Dan. The visit was strange. It was almost 11 at night when Linda heard the knock on her door. Through the peephole, she saw 2 men dressed in dark suits. They showed her badges and announced themselves as detectives. She let them in. It was Richard and Dan, the men who sent the letter to Bud Hopkins. Linda said Dan was a bit standoffish and distant, but Richard was very nice, if a bit nervous. At some point during their 30-minute conversation, Richard almost broke down in tears. Linda retold her experience and how her husband and children were put into such a deep sleep that she couldn't wake them up for a few hours. She actually put a mirror under her son's nose to make sure he was alive.
How does looking up a kid's nose prove he's alive? What was she checking for? Booger mortis?
No, not booger mortis. She was checking to see if he fogged a mirror.
That makes more sense.
Linda asked Richard and Dan to call Bud Hopkins, but they said they weren't comfortable doing that. The men left, and Linda thought that was the end of it. Then Bud Hopkins received another letter.
Dear Bud, we're hoping that this audio tape is satisfactory. We don't know how well, but use it as you wish. We'll keep in touch. Thanks, Dan and Richard. P.S. Linda is a darling little lady.
Along with the letter was a cassette tape. The recording was Richard alone. The tape begins mid-sentence.
Yeah, your feelings on the whole matter, I understand. As far as this tape is concerned, I've written everything down so that it'll be easier to express on tape. Please excuse my reading voice. The subject matter was the strangest ever in my line of work. Linda is a nice person. We saw it through all the discomfort she felt. Linda expressed the deep importance of our reaching you. After actually seeing her and speaking with her, we could see just how frightened and sincere she was. What we saw actually happened, and I hope that it doesn't drive me nuts.
Richard went on to recount the events of the night Linda was taken. Even though Richard didn't want to publicly confirm the story, he thought an audio recording would be useful to Bud.
We'll never forget the look on her face. Pure white with no expression. A white marble doll hanging in the air. With my binoculars, I could see 3 of the ugliest creatures I ever saw. I don't know what they were. They weren't human. Their heads were all out of proportion with no hair. The eyes were very large eyes. Those buggers were escorting her into the craft. Thank you, Bud, for keeping her in good hands. I don't know when you're going to do with this tape, but I do know it's all I can do for you, Bud, for Linda, and all the other people like her. Please respect the importance of our credibility at work. We just can't be identified. We'd be laughed at. Thank you, Bud.
Richard and Dan were struggling to process what they saw. Richard was doing okay, but Dan, his sanity began to unravel. A few weeks after Bud Hopkins received the audio tape from Richard, he received a letter from Dan.
Dear Mr. Hopkins, my name is Danny. You are acquainted with
I'm gonna record the video and try to make the AI say the lyrics. It's crazy, let's see.
with Richard. I decided to get in touch with you after a long fishing trip.
Fishing trip? Oh, I don't like this guy at all.
But be quiet and let the man talk.
I'm not depressed anymore because Linda's alive. However, anger, fear, and embarrassment set in. Richard is dealing with these very same feelings in his own way. He remedies it by secretly watching Linda. I don't think she would like to know that. Seeing Linda reinforces the reality of it all, and he doesn't feel crazy anymore. This doesn't work for me. When I see Linda, I tremble. I don't need reminders. I'll never forget what happened for the rest of my life.
Now, Linda did say she saw a white van parked near her building, and she felt like she was being followed and watched.
That November incident was the worst time of my life. See, the UFO wasn't enough. We had to see some young woman being taken. What were they going to do to her? What could I do to help her? These thoughts were more than I could take. Did Richard tell you about our nightmares? Mr. Hopkins, I sleep with my pistol beside my bed. If they can take Linda, they can take me. Richie has the same fear. We understand that you need us to come forward because these people of yours are considered crazy. We know they aren't crazy. But to be honest with you, you're gonna need more than 2 detectives to figure out what the hell's been happening to a lot of people. Good luck in your investigations. If you ever stumble upon good tangible evidence, be careful whom you give it to. There's an obvious cover-up going on. Thanks for taking the time to read this very long letter. Sincerely, Danny.
This is when Bud Hopkins decided that he had to track down Richard and Dan. He went to precincts all over the city and put up flyers. No cops came forward. But that's not surprising, because Richard and Dan, they weren't cops. Bud Hopkins didn't tell Linda that Richard and Dan lied about being detectives. He wanted to wait and see what else he could find out. A few weeks later, Bud received another letter.
Dear Mr. Hopkins, we're writing to you once again because of the utmost importance of what has to be said. There is much more involved. We were given permission to reveal more facts from a third party also involved in the November 1989 incident. This third party is a very important person and often speaks to many corners of the globe.
Eventually, we learn that this third witness is Javier Perez de Cuellar, the Secretary General of the United Nations. He's one of the highest profile and most important political officials in the world. Richard and Dan were working as a security detail for the Secretary General, driving him to the heliport downtown. When they got close to Linda's building, their car died. Then the three of them saw everything that happened. De Cuellar said that under no circumstances is he to be identified. So Richard and Dan pretended to be cops. Secretary General de Cuellar was happy to hear that Linda was safe, but he wanted no more to do with this. Richard and Dan, however, continued to struggle emotionally. A few weeks later, on April 29, 1991, Linda was on her way to the supermarket when she heard someone call her name. She turned and saw Richard. They made small talk, then Richard pointed to a black luxury car parked nearby, its rear door open. He asked Linda to take a ride so they can talk. Linda said she had too many errands to run, but Richard was welcome to come to her apartment later that evening to talk. Richard said he couldn't do that and asked her to reconsider. Linda apologized again and renewed the invitation for Richard to come by later. Then Richard's face turned dark, and he grabbed her. Dan jumped out of the car and said, "Come on, cutie, he's got you." They shoved her into the car, and Richard held her down while Dan jumped in the driver's seat. Then the car tore away from the curb and disappeared into traffic. While driving, Richard and Dan interrogated Linda. They demanded to know who she was working for, if she was working for the government, any government, if she was working for the aliens. Linda denied all of this through sobs. Then Dan got angry and told her to stop crying, and he said, "You're one of them, aren't you?" He thought she was an alien. She denied this too. Then Dan started to get really angry. He pulled into a rest stop. Dan demanded that she take off her shoes so he could examine her feet.
What is this, forced podiatry?
Just go with it. It'll make sense later.
Okay, they want to see her feet. Go on.
Though she feels ridiculous, Linda complies and shows them her feet. She knew that if she didn't do this willingly, they would just force her. For almost 4 hours, they drove around and asked Linda questions. Who were the aliens? Where did they come from? What did they do when they took her? Where did they go? She answered again and again that she was only partly conscious and couldn't remember anything. Finally, they dropped her off at her building. Richard apologized, but Linda said she never wanted to see them again. To try and get more details, Bud Hopkins conducted a hypnosis session with Linda. They learned that the car was a Rolls Royce. It had a blue United Nations sticker and diplomatic plates. And there was a second car that followed them,
Oh
a
shit,
Mercedes.
it's the other way
Linda was
around.
able to remember a couple of numbers from the plate. Using this information and calling in a favor from a friend, Bud Hopkins confirmed that the Rolls-Royce belonged to the Secretary General. A few weeks later, Linda heard her name called again. It was Richard. She ran, he chased. Eventually, she was able to get away from him and into her apartment building.
God.
A few months went by without incident, but then Bud Hopkins received another letter from Dan. And if you thought this story was wild before,
September 17th, 1991. Dear Bud, I hope this letter finds you in good health and happy spirits. Much has happened since I last contacted you.
Dan apologized for what they did to Linda. He said there's no excuse, but he and Richard are under a tremendous amount of stress. It turned out that Richard, Dan, and Secretary General de Cuellar had a shared memory that was triggered by the events of the past few months. After the UFO plunged into the river, the three men suddenly found themselves on a beach. Nearby, they saw Linda and three aliens digging in the sand. They could hear them speaking a foreign language, an alien language. Linda and the aliens then walked up to the men. Linda's face was blank, but she held up a dead fish and yelled at them, "Look and see what you've done." Then one of the beings said, "Lady of the Sands." The men noticed the aliens had no toes.
Ah,
Told ya.
I do respect her for sticking up for that fish, though. That was solid.
Linda and the aliens then walked toward the water, and suddenly Richard, Dan, and de Cuellar were back near their car, though the Secretary General was on the roof of the car. Dan and Richard helped him down.
You're making this up.
Nope. This was all witnessed by multiple people. In the letter, Dan gets annoyed.
When we questioned Linda last April, we knew she was withholding information. Perhaps she was frightened and didn't know what our intentions were. The fact remains, we still don't know who she is. We were led to believe that she is the Lady of the Sands, whoever that is. Whatever the case, we need to know who she is. As for me, Linda is a pain in the rump. I dislike admitting that. She could fly to the moon in her spacecraft, and the distance wouldn't be far enough as far as I'm concerned. On a good day, I think about having a heart-to-heart talk with Linda. Linda would never consent to such a meeting, but we will meet in the near future. Linda says she is indifferent. Bud, she is different, and I'm gonna find out the difference. If you can, prepare Linda for a visit from me. I don't want her running off again. Please stop trying to find us. And please tell Linda we honestly didn't kill that fish. Thank you, Bud. Danny.
So Bud hypnotized Linda again to see if she could remember any of this.
Did she remember?
She did, all of it. She said they were taking samples of the sand to see if they could figure out why the fish were dying. She also remembered being called Lady of the Sands, but she had no idea what that meant. Bud then read her Dan's letter that said he would be coming for her. And on October 15th, in broad daylight, Dan grabbed her and shoved her into his car. This time he was alone, and he was out of his mind. Dan drove for a while and then pulled the car over. He whispered to Linda, "Come here, half-breed," then kissed her all over his face.
Ugh, this guy.
Yeah, he's gross. They kept driving, and periodically he would grab her knee. She would resist, and he would say things like, "Oh, you're a tough one." They eventually arrived at a beach house on Long Island. By now, Linda stopped resisting. She figured whatever Dan wanted to happen was just gonna happen, and resisting would just make it worse.
Always resist, ladies.
Yeah, give yourself a fighting chance. Plus, bruises, scratches, and other evidence can help find the perp. Anyway, when they got into the house, Dan kissed her all over her face again. He told her to make herself at home, and he went to the kitchen to make coffee. She looked for a phone. There wasn't one. She looked for some identifying information so she could learn Dan's last name. There was nothing. There were two pictures.
Oh, man. Problem, bro. The problem? You got a problem, nigga? You swear up on me like that, dog? You reach a point where
When I find myself in time.
you can't break a person.
Framed. One was of Linda kissing her son Johnny goodbye. The other picture was of Linda by a lighthouse. Dan returned from the kitchen carrying a white gift-wrapped box. Linda opened it. Inside was a negligee.
Oh, no.
Yeah, he told her to put it on. She refused. She could see the anger in Dan's eyes, so Linda offered to put it on over her clothes. Dan agreed. Dan then goes white and says, "Oh my God, it was you." Dan then dropped to his knees and started crying. Linda gently put a hand on his shoulder, and then she bolted for the door and out onto the beach.
Atta girl.
She ran as fast as she could. She could hear Dan screaming behind her, and he was getting closer. Finally, he grabbed her, and instead of hurting her, he started gently rocking her back and forth. He said, "Isn't this nice? We'll go far away and make a new family." Linda said she didn't want a new family. Dan snapped. He shoved Linda's face into the sand and yelled, "Dig more holes, Lady of the Sands." He tried to kiss her. He grabbed at her clothes. Linda screamed for help, but the beach was deserted. Finally, Dan yanked Linda to her feet and said, "Let's clean your face." He dragged her by her hair and shoved her head under the water. Then Linda blacked out. Dan held Linda underwater, but luckily the undertow grabbed her and helped her to break free. She crawled back onto the beach, but she was so exhausted that she didn't care what happened to her. But Dan didn't try to drown her again. Instead, he sat next to her, cradled her in his arms, and rocked her back and forth again.
Yikes, this guy's a few fries short of a Happy Meal.
Oh yeah, he's lost it. But then Linda turns around, and standing in the doorway of the beach house is Richard. Richard yelled for Dan to get off her, then helped them into the house. He calmed Dan down and persuaded him to go upstairs and get cleaned up. Once everything was calm, Richard took Linda home. A few days later, Bud Hopkins receives a letter from Richard.
Dear Mr. Hopkins, I was angered and saddened about the whole incident that took place on October 15th concerning Linda and Dan. Linda is very special to me, and Dan is my closest friend. But I want my friend back, but he just isn't the same.
Richard also included a couple of pictures that Dan took of Linda while she was running on the beach. And in this letter, Richard explained that Dan was getting psychiatric help. What had driven Dan over the edge was the fact that Linda had been speaking to them telepathically.
Wait, what?
But when Dan and Richard grabbed her off the street the first time, she said to them telepathically, "Be kind, don't hurt me." This was very unsettling for Dan.
Oh, but this Richard guy doesn't find it weird.
Because when they were on the beach with the aliens, Richard telepathically told Linda how much he loved her, and she telepathically returned his feelings.
Oh, man, there's romance now.
Now I better watch
He told me the story had everything, and boy howdy, you weren't just whistling Dixie.
Told you.
She is kind and giving. Does Linda have this effect on us? Or are we the unusual ones? I can tell you this, if she were the ugliest woman around, I would care for her just the same. Please tell Linda there's no reason to be afraid.
Kind of work.
Tell her if she runs away, I won't chase her. I'm so sorry for what happened. Many thanks and kind regards.
Yeah, it sounds like he's pretty well settled by now.
Yeah, that's a good thing because a few days later, he went to see Linda. And now we turn the story.
I am certain sorrow. Pop the bottle.
Thursday, November 21st, Linda was on her way to the post office when Richard appeared. They spent most of the day together, and Richard confessed his love for her. Linda also had feelings for Richard, but she was married and had a family. She was conflicted, though when he kissed her, she didn't resist.
Uh-oh, Linda got a groove back.
So they talked about their childhoods, things they had in common. Richard was very interested in Linda's son, Johnny. He said he always felt like he had a son, even though he didn't. The following day, Bud receives a letter from Richard.
Jeez, does this guy get paid by the letter or what?
Dear Mr.
Back
Hopkins,
myself
the meeting
to the
yesterday between Linda and I went very
Now
well.
I better
She was
watch
very
your
relaxed and comfortable.
phone.
Sure was.
Stop it.
Tommy.
Linda is a very interesting person. There's no wondering why, considering what she may be.
I
Yes,
am
but I believe that Linda is from
sorrow.
another place, but raised here.
Richard gave an
really?
update about Dan, who had taken a
Pop
turn
the
from course and was now
bottle
in a mental
for
facility. Then Richard dropped the bomb. He said that since he was 10 years old, he had
Back
been dreaming
myself
about a
to
girl.
the
He felt like they grew
limit.
up together.
Now I
Richard and the
better
girl
watch
didn't
your
know each other's names, so they made up names. He called her Baby Ann, and she called him Mickey. Over the years, Richard's relationship suffered because no matter who he dated, he only had feelings for Baby Ann, who he thought was a figment of his imagination. The older he got, the more Richard dreamed about Baby Ann. When they were in their 20s, they were in love and wanted to spend the rest of their lives together. Then he would wake up. Richard stopped dreaming of Baby Ann for 20 years. Then that early morning in November 1989, he saw Baby Ann hovering in a beam of blue light.
Linda is my baby Ann. She's real. I came away very angry that night after I left her apartment. It wasn't fair. Bud, I love her so, but it's too late. I've hinted to Linda about our bond, but she doesn't remember. Linda has me standing between the fire and the water. If I go in either direction, I'll burn or I'll drown.
That was poetic.
I thought so too. So Bud asked Linda if she had any imaginary friends when she was a child. She said yes. His name was Mickey. And now that you mention it, Mickey looked a lot like Richard.
Ooh.
And so did her son Johnny. Linda was shocked when she read Richard's letter, but she didn't want to get into whether Richard was Johnny's father, and Bud didn't press the issue. Richard didn't involve himself in Linda's life very much after that, but she did receive a creepy letter from Dan, writing from a mental institution.
By the time this Christmas greeting reaches you, I will have managed to get out of this place successfully. Did you believe I would let you go so easy? It seemed like yesterday when I hated you. Until I think about looking into those big, deep brown eyes of yours. Then the hate goes away. I can't wait to watch you move as you walk by. I'm gonna inscribe our names with my lips on that full heart-shaped mouth. Linda, you don't belong here, but I'll find a place for you.
He goes on to say that he's going to take her somewhere far away, and that she'll make a beautiful bride.
If you see Richard, tell him I said go to hell. If I don't get out of here, I'll be thinking of you. If I do, I'll be looking at you. Happy holiday, pretty. Danny.
As far as we know, Dan never showed up, but Linda was paranoid for years. And as Linda's experiences finally tapered off, her son Johnny started talking about weird dreams, where little men would take him to a round room and talk to him without moving their lips. I remember how Linda said the aliens put something in her nostril. Well, whenever Johnny would have these bad dreams, he'd wake up with a bloody nose. Well, I told you this was a doozy. This story is basically a summary of Bud Hopkins' book, Witness, the True Story of the Brooklyn Bridge UFO Abductions. I'll put links below where you can buy the book or read it online for free. We only scratched the surface.
Oh, this, we just scratched the surface.
Oh yeah, this book is over 400 pages of interviews, transcripts from hypnosis sessions, even pictures. This has been called the most important UFO case of the 20th century. But is it true? An article written by investigators George Hansen, Richard Butler, and Joseph Stefula challenges the story. They interviewed Linda and did a lot of legwork and say they've debunked it. I'll challenge their arguments and see if we can figure out if the story is true. The first problem we have is that the only real witness is Linda. She's the only person who saw Richard and Dan.
Yeah, but the tapes they said.
That's right. They did send Bud audio tapes, and other people have heard those tapes. Same with the woman whose car stalled on the Brooklyn Bridge, Janet Kimball. People have spoken to her and have seen her speaking with Bud. But handwriting analysis was done on her letter, and the handwriting is a match for Linda's. Linda also claimed her cousin Connie was with her when someone tried to kidnap her. Bud asked to speak to Connie. A couple of days later, Connie called. When Bud hung up the phone, he had a sour look on his face. His wife asked him what was wrong. He said, "Linda just called me pretending to be Connie." We're told that Secretary General de Cuellar met with Bud at O'Hare Airport and confirmed the story, though he wouldn't speak publicly. But nobody witnessed this meeting. And de Cuellar's representatives have said that he was home asleep that night. His office even issued a statement forcefully denying anything like this happened. But what else is the Secretary General of the United Nations gonna say? I was kidnapped by aliens, woke up on a beach, saw the Lady of the Sands, and then was beamed back to the roof of my car?
Well, when you put it that way, the story starts to sound far-fetched.
Plus, the actual way security and transport are handled for a diplomat of this level is not remotely close to what's described in the book. Why didn't Linda report any of this to the police? She was kidnapped multiple times, assaulted, almost killed. She feared for her safety and the safety of her family. Bud even asked her to go to the police. She wouldn't. When the other investigators interviewed Linda and her husband Steve, Steve was very quiet. He had trouble answering a lot of the questions, but Linda would then jump in to help him remember. Steve left the interview way early, even though Linda asked him to stay. Now, maybe it's unrelated, but their marriage didn't work out. Linda liked books about aliens and UFOs. She contacted Bud shortly after reading his book Intruders. And if her story sounds like it came from a science fiction novel, that's because maybe it did. Just a few months before Linda contacted Bud Hopkins, the sci-fi novel Night Eyes was released. There are some similarities to Linda's case. Linda was taken to a UFO hovering over her high-rise apartment building in New York City. Sarah was taken by a UFO hovering over her high-rise apartment building in New York City. Dan and Richard claimed to have been on a stakeout and were involved in a UFO abduction during early morning hours. The same thing happened to government agents in Night Eyes. During the kidnapping, Dan took Linda to a safe house on the beach. During the kidnapping in Night Eyes, Derek took Wendy to a safe house on the beach. There are a few other coincidences, but some I think are a stretch. But these stood out to me as a little too similar. Debunkers often bring up that Linda's building is visible from the loading dock of the New York Post. At 3 a.m., the loading dock is packed with dozens of workers loading trucks. Nobody reported seeing a UFO or anything strange. But investigators only interviewed the manager, who spends a lot of his shift indoors. And while the dock does have excellent visibility of Linda's building, the area where the papers are being loaded, you can't see her building at all. Bud said that in 10 years, Linda's story never changed. But that's not true. People who've seen her speak at conventions said the details have changed over time. Linda claims she would receive 50% of the book sales of a movie deal or anything else that would come from the story. She later denied this. Then she said she did say it, but she was intentionally lying. Then she said she received a percentage, but it was just a token, as she described it. But none of that's true. Linda got between 15 and 25% of the book, the movie rights, or anything else that came from her story. But if Linda is perpetrating a hoax, she's got a lot of people involved. Bud Hopkins has multiple witnesses on audio tape and video, and these have been confirmed by other people. But Linda has made other wild claims. Like she said she was abducted by aliens with John Gotti.
Oh, it can't be no family boss, John Gotti. The Dapper Don.
The Dapper Don. She said other crazy things, like she might be part alien. Her red blood cells are immortal. She's descended from Joan of Arc. She was a professional singer in a well-known pop band. She said she met with Cardinal O'Connor. She was summoned to a private meeting with the Pope. She said she was in World Trade Center on 9/11 when the planes hit. Bud Hopkins knew she made these claims, but he chose to leave them out of the book.
It's best not to irritate a notorious crime boss.
Hey, that's always good advice. Now, supporters of Bud Hopkins say he's a top-notch investigator. I disagree. Bud only interviewed and hypnotized people who could support his premise. In an alien abduction story, the most important people to speak to are the ones who can disprove the story. Bud didn't like to speak to those people. In fact, when dealing with debunkers, Bud would get defensive and angry. Even Bud's wife, Carol, felt his investigations lacked objectivity. What was important to Bud was getting the story, not necessarily finding the truth. He hated people debunking his story, so he wasn't going to do it to someone else. Personally, I think Bud Hopkins was a compassionate, kind, and empathetic person. After all, he had a UFO abduction support group meeting in his house every week. If you made a claim that you were taken by aliens, Bud wanted to believe you. He wanted to help you. I think his heart was in the right place, but that left him impressionable. Was Linda hoaxing him for attention, for money? She went from housewife to rock star in the UFO community, and she loved the attention. Now, I know this story sounds crazy, but